Step into your garden right now. What do you see? A lush, thriving paradise. Tomato vines hang heavy with clusters of green fruit beginning to blush red. Cucumbers climb eagerly up their trellises, and zucchini leaves spread as wide as elephant ears. It feels like a moment of complete victory. It feels as though the hardest work of the year is finally behind you, and now you can relax on the porch, slow down, and gather the endless rewards. But I need to tell you a quiet and uncomfortable truth. Your garden is lying to you. What you are seeing is what agronomists and experienced growers call the green illusion. It is a beautiful biological trap. Beneath that thick, magnificent canopy of green, a silent and unforgiving countdown has already begun. While the scorching sun beats down, your soil is running out of strength. Pest populations are quietly entering their fastest growth period of the entire year, and microscopic fungal spores are clinging beneath your leaves, waiting for the first humid night to destroy everything you have spent months building. If you do nothing this month, your lush summer paradise could collapse into a dry, brown graveyard by September. August is not the finish line. It is the single most decisive month of your entire growing season. What you do over the next few weeks will determine whether your summer crops continue producing, whether you receive a second enormous autumn harvest, or whether you keep pulling fresh, sweet food from the soil straight through winter. We are moving toward a closing door. Since the summer solstice, daylight has been quietly slipping away, a few minutes at a time, every single day. In spring, the earth is forgiving. If you plant 2 weeks late in April, the season still waits for you as the days become longer and warmer. But in August, being late changes nothing. Frost does not care how close your carrots were to maturity. It arrives when it arrives, and a crop that is still 1 week away from harvest is worth exactly as much as a crop that was never planted. This is the deepest lesson the soil teaches us. We must prepare for the cold while the sun is still shining. We must have the courage to remove what is old so there is room for what comes next. Now let us look at the 20 essential tasks you must complete this month to protect your summer crops, double your autumn harvest, and safeguard the most important part of the garden, which is you. 1. Harvest summer crops aggressively every day. The first step in protecting your late summer garden is learning when to let go. Look closely at your cucumbers, zucchini, summer squash, and beans. It is tempting to leave that perfect cucumber on the vine for just one more day so it can grow a little larger. But biologically, a plant does not exist to feed you. Its entire evolutionary purpose is to produce seeds and reproduce. The moment one cucumber or zucchini becomes oversized, turns pale, and allows its seeds to fully mature on the vine, a powerful hormonal signal travels through the entire plant. That chemical message says, "Mission accomplished. The next generation is secure. We can stop now." The production of new blossoms quickly slows or stops, and the plant begins to decline. When you harvest every day, picking cucumbers and zucchini while they are still young, firm, and tender, you are actively tricking the plant. You are resetting its biological clock and forcing it to produce fresh flowers and more fruit in a desperate, beautiful attempt to complete its natural cycle. Walk through your garden every morning. If you discover a giant, overgrown zucchini or cucumber you overlooked, even if it has turned yellow and is no longer good to eat, remove it from the vine immediately. Toss it into the compost pile if necessary, but take it off the plant so the flow of life can begin again. How often do we do the same thing in our own lives? We hold tightly to achievements or burdens that have become too heavy, never realizing that keeping them attached may be telling our inner growth to stop. Release the mature fruit today so that something new can bloom tomorrow. 2. Remove and destroy fallen fruit beneath your trees. Walk through an orchard or beneath your fruit trees this month, and you will probably see fallen fruit scattered across the grass. It may look natural, even poetic, but beneath the skin of those decaying apples, peaches, and pears, a dangerous cycle is already unfolding. Worms and insect larvae that spent the summer feeding inside the fruit are now beginning to crawl out. They burrow into the soft soil beneath the tree, pupate in the darkness, and prepare to survive the winter underground. Next spring, they will emerge as a massive army of mature pests, ready to attack your blossoms and destroy your fruit all over again. August gives you the opportunity to break this cycle of generational trauma in the garden. Collect every piece of fallen fruit. Do not allow it to remain on the ground and rot. Do not place it in a cold compost pile, because most standard home compost systems never become hot enough to destroy the larvae or pathogens hidden inside. Instead, bury the damaged fruit deeply, burn it where local laws permit, or destroy it completely. In life, we often ignore the small things that fall from our branches, allowing them to decay quietly in our subconscious. We believe that because they are out of sight, they are gone. But unless we sweep the ground clean, the pests of the past will only bury themselves deeper, waiting to infect the seasons ahead. Clean the ground beneath your trees, and allow next spring to begin with a clean slate. 3. Clear away spent summer plants that are past their peak. By the middle of August, some of your early summer squash, cucumbers, and bush beans may look exhausted. They are no longer the vigorous heroes they were in June. Their lower leaves are withered, their production has slowed to almost nothing, and their surfaces are coated in dust. Still, we hesitate to remove them. We tell ourselves, maybe if I leave this plant for one more week, it will give me one final cucumber. That hesitation can become a quiet disaster. These aging, declining plants are no longer productive solar panels. They have become weak and vulnerable hosts. Their compromised defenses attract spider mites, aphids, and fungal diseases. Leaving them in the garden gives pests a place to reproduce in enormous numbers before moving directly onto your healthy young fall crops. Be ruthless this week. Pull every plant that is clearly past its productive peak. Examine each one carefully. If you notice signs of viral or fungal disease, do not place it in the compost pile. Bag it and throw it away, or burn it if your local regulations allow. We cannot welcome the future into our space while constantly protecting the dying remains of the past. Pulling out a plant you once cared for may feel like failure, but in the mathematics of the garden, it is an act of faith. You are clearing the canvas so that a new masterpiece has room to appear. 4. Pinch back basil and other leafy herbs. Look closely at your basil. It is stretching upward toward the sky, preparing to display delicate white or purple flowers. To someone passing by, a flowering herb garden may look beautiful. To a gardener, it is an urgent call to act. When herbs such as basil, mint, oregano, and thyme begin to flower, their physiology changes completely. The essential oils, the volatile aromatic compounds responsible for their powerful fragrance, therapeutic scent, and culinary value, begin moving away from the leaves and concentrating in the blossoms. The leaves gradually become thinner, tougher, and intensely bitter. To keep your herbs tender, sweet, and productive for the months ahead, you must pinch them back strategically. Do not simply remove the top pair of leaves. Choose a main stem, follow it downward, and make your cut just above the second set of true leaves. This strong cut stimulates the dormant buds located at the leaf nodes, forcing the plant to branch into 2 new stems. You are not merely delaying the flowers, you are multiplying your harvest while creating a fuller, bushier, and stronger plant. There is a powerful lesson hidden inside this simple pinch. Sometimes, to remain sweet and useful in the world, we must stop trying to produce flowers only for display. We must allow our growing tips to be pruned so that we can become wider, fuller, and more firmly grounded in our branches. 5. Remove flowers from self-sowing herbs before they spread. While caring for your herbs, pay close attention to the plants that are being allowed to go completely to seed, including dill, garlic chives, bronze fennel, and sage. If you leave their flowers untouched, the blooms will soon dry out, turn brown, and scatter thousands of tiny seeds throughout your garden beds. When spring returns, those seeds will awaken. Dill may appear throughout your carrot rows, garlic chives may crowd out your delicate spinach, and fennel may begin taking over your raised beds. These unexpected seedlings are known as volunteer plants. Although they can occasionally be a pleasant surprise, in a carefully managed, high-yield garden, they become weeds. They are beautiful thieves that steal water, nutrients, and valuable sunlight from the crops you intentionally chose to grow. Cut off the spent flower heads before they have time to release their seeds. This small act of setting boundaries protects the integrity of your soil and preserves the structure of next year's crop rotation. Uncontrolled passion can easily become a weed in our own lives. Without discipline and careful attention to where our seeds are falling, the things we create without restraint may return later and choke out the organized growth we are trying to build. Keep your boundaries clear. 6. Protect your sweet corn silks with mineral oil. For anyone growing sweet corn, August is the moment of truth. Your stalks are now standing tall. The ears are swelling, and soft, beautiful silks with a pinkish tint are beginning to emerge. But as those silks appear, they release a scent that acts like a beacon for one of the most destructive pests in the vegetable garden, the corn earworm moth. The moth lays her eggs directly on the fresh silks. Within days, tiny larvae hatch and crawl down through the silk channel, entering the tip of the developing ear, where they begin feeding on the sweet, tender kernels. You can stop this invasion cleanly and organically with two simple tools: a medicine dropper and a bottle of pure mineral oil. Wait until the silks have completed their role in pollination. You will know this has happened when their tips begin turning brown and dry. At that exact moment, place 5 or 6 drops of mineral oil directly into the silk channel at the top of each ear. The oil coats the inside, forming a harmless, chemical-free mechanical barrier that suffocates invading larvae before they can reach even one kernel of your corn. The most vulnerable parts of our lives often require the gentlest and most precise protection. We do not need heavy, toxic sprays to keep every pest away. Sometimes all we need is a small amount of something pure, applied at exactly the right time, to the narrow gate where danger enters. 7. Pinch the growing tips of winter squash and pumpkin vines. Walk over to your winter squash, pumpkins, and melons. By August, their vines have become sprawling giants, climbing over fences, escaping their beds, and continuously producing new yellow flowers. It may look like limitless energy, but that appearance is an illusion. Every new blossom and every additional foot of vine produced in August demands an enormous amount of photosynthetic energy. But the calendar tells a harsher truth. Any new fruit that sets on a winter squash vine in August will not have enough warm days remaining to develop a thick, protective rind before frost arrives. If you allow the vines to keep expanding, the plant will divide its valuable sugars between ripening the older, established pumpkins and attempting to grow new fruits that have little chance of reaching maturity. You must step in and say, "Stop." Find the growing tip, the terminal end, of each winter squash and pumpkin vine and pinch it off cleanly. This simple cut creates a biological detour. It immediately stops the plant's forward growth and redirects its entire flow of nutrients and sugars into the fruit that is already formed. This is the secret to producing those deep orange, rock-hard rinds that allow winter squash to remain stored in your pantry for as long as 6 months. When our energy is scattered across too many projects, none of them reaches full maturity. Have the courage to prune endless expansion so that what you have already begun can fully ripen into something capable of sustaining you through the winter. 8. Reset your garden with deep, infrequent morning watering. In the blistering heat of August, watering becomes a daily battle. But the way you water this month will either create a resilient oasis or build the foundation for a fragile tragedy. The mistake almost everyone makes is simple. When afternoon temperatures rise, we panic. We see our plants wilting, rush outside with the hose, and give the garden a quick daily sprinkle across the surface. But when you wet only the top inch of soil, you are training your plants to remain weak. Their roots have no reason to grow deeper. Instead, they gather near the scorching surface, exactly where the water is. By the next hot afternoon, that shallow layer has baked dry, the roots begin to burn, and the plant collapses into chronic stress. You must water deeply and less often. Apply enough water to penetrate 10 to 12 inches into the soil for vegetables, and as deep as 18 to 24 inches for woody shrubs and trees. This long, slow soaking encourages the root system to follow moisture downward into the cool, dark, protected layers of the earth, where the brutal summer heat cannot reach it. Timing is equally important. Water only between 4:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. During this early morning window, evaporation loss falls below 12%. If you water at midday, as much as 60% of that water can be lost to heat and wind. Pouring cold water onto soil baked to 104 degrees Fahrenheit can also create a steam bath capable of literally boiling the delicate feeder roots of your plants. Watering at night creates a different danger. It leaves the foliage wet for hours, inviting powdery mildew and blight to spread through the garden. Shallow habits create shallow roots, and when the heat of life arrives, we wither. Send your roots deep into the quiet morning hours, where the water remains cool and the foundations cannot be shaken. 9. Clean, repair, and fine-tune your irrigation system. Because water is the lifeblood of the August garden, you cannot afford even one failure in the systems delivering it. Whether you use advanced drip lines, soaker hoses, or container watering setups, every part of that system is now operating under maximum pressure. August heat causes plastic tubing to expand, loosening connections. Mineral deposits and particles of soil can clog small emitters, leaving one plant drowning while another only a few feet away quietly dies of thirst. Set aside an hour this weekend to inspect every line. Turn on the system and search for unusually wet areas that reveal leaks, as well as bone-dry patches that indicate a blocked nozzle or emitter. Container gardeners must also watch for potting soil shrinkage. When peat-based potting soil dries out completely, it contracts and pulls away from the sides of the container. When you water, the liquid simply flows through the gap between the soil and the pot, draining from the bottom without ever soaking the root ball. The solution is immersion therapy. Submerge the entire pot in a bucket of tepid water for 15 to 30 minutes, allowing the soil to expand and recover its proper sponge-like structure. If you are gardening in plastic kiddie pools or other containers without drainage, install a simple removable rubber plug at the lowest point. This gives you a quick way to release excess water after a sudden, torrential summer storm, preventing root rot from drowning your harvest. Our internal connection systems also require regular maintenance. Examine the lines of communication in your life. Make sure your support is truly reaching the roots, and that no hidden blockage is leaving someone you love in a state of silent thirst. 10. Clean up and propagate strawberry runners. Look down at your strawberry patch. By August, the mother plants have finished producing fruit and are sending long, delicate, leafless stems across the surface of the soil. These stems are known as runners, and they are the strawberry plant's natural way of searching for new territory. If you allow them to spread without control, they will root wherever they touch the ground, eventually forming a crowded, tangled patch that produces less fruit the following year. But when managed with intention, August becomes the perfect opportunity to multiply your strawberry plants completely free of charge. Begin by clearing away weeds and dead leaves around the mother plants. Take the small green plantlet growing at the end of a runner and place it gently on top of a small pot filled with moist compost, or directly onto a clean patch of prepared soil. Pin it firmly in place. You can use a small, smooth stone, a U-shaped piece of wire, or even a simple twig pressed into the soil to keep the node in steady contact with the moist earth. Within 2 to 3 weeks, that small node will begin producing strong, independent white roots. Once those roots are established, cut the connecting runner away from the mother plant. Just like that, you have created a vigorous new strawberry plant that will be ready to produce sweet fruit next spring. This is the beauty of natural abundance. Sometimes, our branches stretch outward in search of somewhere to land. Do not leave them drifting in the wind. Anchor them in good soil, allow them to take root, and watch how one carefully supported connection can double the sweetness of your future. 11. Prune the lower tomato leaves and activate systemic acquired resistance, SAR. Your tomato plants may be enormous now, but the countdown to disease has already begun. Fungal spores such as early blight are resting in the soil, waiting for rain or splashing water to carry them onto the lowest leaves. Once those spores land, they begin climbing. The lower foliage turns yellow and develops dark, target-shaped spots. Week after week, the infection moves upward until the plant is stripped of leaves and the ripening fruit is damaged by sun scald. Go into the garden this weekend and remove the lower 12 to 18 inches of foliage from your tomato stems. Cut away every branch that is yellowing, touching the soil, or crowding the base of the plant. This creates a clean, open airflow zone that reduces soil splashback and allows the breeze to dry the remaining leaves quickly after morning dew. Now comes the advanced scientific technique used by professional growers. After pruning, you can manually activate the tomato plant's immune system through a process known as systemic acquired resistance, or SAR. Dissolve one standard, uncoated aspirin tablet, which contains salicylic acid, in 1 gallon of water. Spray the solution generously over the foliage. Salicylic acid is the natural signaling molecule plants produce when they come under attack. By applying this mild diluted spray, you are essentially vaccinating your tomatoes. You are tricking the plant's immune system into believing that a serious infection is approaching. In response, the tomato floods its tissues with protective phytoalexins and defense proteins. This prepares the plant so that when real fungal spores arrive, they encounter what is effectively an impenetrable wall of resistance. Controlled exposure to stress creates the strength needed to prevent future collapse. Do not fear the pruning shears or the cold spray of water. They are the tools that teach your plants how to remain strong when the storm arrives. 12. Adjust your fertilizer to feed fruit, not leaves. By August, your soil is exhausted. Heavy-feeding summer crops have spent months drawing nutrients from the earth to build their massive structures, and the tank is now running almost completely dry. But reaching for the same fertilizer you used in May would be a serious mistake. In spring, nitrogen is valuable because it drives rapid vegetative growth and produces abundant green foliage. In August, however, too much nitrogen becomes a disaster. It creates huge, soft, dark green leaves with weak cell walls, leaving the plant extremely vulnerable to pests and disease. At the same time, that excessive leafy growth actively interferes with the production of flowers and fruit. In late summer, you must change your fertilizer formula and begin feeding for fruit rather than foliage. Your plants now need phosphorus and potassium to build sugars, strengthen their stems, and power the final stage of ripening. You can make a powerful organic potassium tea at home without spending anything. Chop 4 or 5 banana peels, naturally rich in potassium, and soak them in 1 gallon of water for 2 to 3 days. Strain the liquid, then pour it directly around the base of flowering tomatoes, peppers, and squash once each week. If you are growing hardneck garlic, remember its special rule. Garlic should be fertilized only twice during its entire life. Once when the ground thaws in spring, and again in early summer. All feeding must stop at least 1 month before harvest to preserve the bulb's delicate flavor and their ability to remain in storage. As we mature, our diet must also change. What once sustained us in youth, the drive for fast outward expansion, can overwhelm us later in life. Direct your resources now towards sweetening the fruit, hardening the wood, and preparing for the harvest. 13. Start cool season fall crops indoors to bypass thermal dormancy. If you want a spectacular autumn harvest of broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, spinach, and lettuce, you must begin sowing those seeds this month. But if you plant them directly into hot garden beds in early August, you may return later to find nothing but bare, empty rows. The reason is a biological process known as thermal dormancy, or thermo-inhibition. Seeds from cool season plants such as lettuce and spinach carry an ancient survival mechanism inherited from their wild ancestors. When soil temperatures rise above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and exposed late summer soil can easily reach 90 degrees or more, the seed refuses to germinate. It recognizes that sprouting in the fierce heat of August would cause the young seedling to fry and die within only a few hours. Instead, the seed remains asleep, eventually rotting in the damp soil without ever emerging. The advanced solution is to start your fall seeds indoors or place them in a cool, bright, shaded location, such as the north side of your house. By sowing them in trays where temperatures remain lower, you bypass thermal dormancy entirely. The seeds can germinate within days. By September, you will have a sturdy army of compact, healthy transplants ready to enter the garden just as the autumn weather begins to change. Some dreams cannot germinate in the heat of a crowded and demanding life. When the world becomes too loud and too hot, find a quiet, shaded place where your new ideas can be nurtured until they are strong enough to face the sun. 14. Direct sow cold hardy root. Crops into the ground brassicas and salad greens may thrive when started in trays, but another group of fall crops must be sown directly into the garden bed. Carrots, beets, turnips, and radishes. These are root crops, and their entire future depends on one delicate taproot growing straight down into the earth. If you start a carrot or turnip in a tray and later attempt to transplant it, that tiny taproot will almost certainly be bent or damaged. The result is a harvest of short, twisted, forked, and deformed roots that are nearly useless in the kitchen. Sow carrots and beets directly into the ground during August, but use a simple trick to keep the soil cool and moist while the seeds germinate. After planting the seeds and watering the row with cold water, place a clean wooden board or a sheet of damp cardboard directly over the seeded line. This cover blocks the scorching sunlight, traps moisture beneath it, and can lower the soil temperature by as much as 10 degrees. Beginning on the third day, look beneath the board every morning. The instant you see the first tiny green shoot breaking through the soil, remove the cover immediately so the seedlings can receive the light they need. Some journeys cannot be protected in containers or moved safely from one place to another. They must begin directly in the hard, untamed soil where they are meant to grow. Give them a little shade, keep them moist, and trust them to grow straight and true. 15. Plant a third succession of fast-growing summer crops. Many gardeners view August only as the doorway to autumn, but in many regions, there are still 60 to 80 days remaining before the first expected frost. That is more than enough time to fit in a third productive round of fast-maturing summer crops such as bush beans, zucchini, and cucumbers. And here is the beautiful secret of planting late in summer. These later crops are often even more successful than those planted in spring. By the end of August, the life cycles of major summer pests, including destructive squash vine borers and cucumber beetles, have already passed their peak. The intense pest pressure of June and July is beginning to fade. At the same time, the warm August soil speeds up germination, allowing the seeds to sprout and grow at nearly twice the rate they achieved in the cold ground of April. When these young plants begin producing in late September, they will take over the harvest just as your old, exhausted spring-planted vines finally stop producing. Starting late is not always a disadvantage. Sometimes it is a strategy. Let others race to be first. By launching your second wave as the heat begins to break and the predators grow tired, you may gather the sweetest rewards of the entire growing year. 16. Support heavy branches and camouflage fruit from visual predators. August is the month when your garden carries its greatest weight. Tomato clusters are loaded with ripening fruit, and your corn stands tall and heavy. But that weight also leaves the garden dangerously exposed to sudden, violent late summer thunderstorms. One powerful gust of wind or a heavy downpour can snap a large tomato branch within seconds, destroying months of patient waiting. Walk through your garden this week and support every heavily loaded stem before disaster strikes. Use soft garden ties, strips of cloth, or flexible plant clips that will not cut into the tender surface as the stems continue to thicken. But another danger is waiting nearby: birds. As tomatoes, grapes, and figs begin changing to shades of red and purple, they become bright, irresistible targets. Birds see your garden in a completely different way than you do. Human eyes contain 3 types of color receptors, while birds have 4. That fourth receptor allows them to detect ultraviolet light, an entire band of color that remains invisible to us. Many fruits reflect ultraviolet light as they ripen. To a bird flying above your garden, changing tomatoes and berries may appear to glow like brilliant electric neon signs against the surrounding green leaves. You can defend your harvest with one clever and inexpensive solution: small green organza mesh bags. Slip a bag over each cluster of ripening fruit and tie it securely in place. Because the mesh is green, it blends naturally into the foliage and hides the fruit from view. To the highly sensitive ultraviolet vision of birds, the glowing signal is concealed, making the fruit resemble ordinary green, unripe leaves. Success naturally makes you a target, and the things you build will attract those who want to take them before they are ready. Do not leave your achievements exposed. Cover them with a little quiet camouflage, support their weight, and protect them until they truly belong to you. 17. Deadhead spent perennials to encourage a second flush of life. Walk toward your flower borders and ornamental beds. Your coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, lavender, and yarrow have already created a magnificent display, but now their blossoms are fading, drying out, and beginning to form seeds. If you leave those dead flowers attached, you are allowing the plant to enter retirement. It reads the dried seed heads as proof that its life cycle has been completed, and it stops directing energy toward new upward growth. Step in with your pruning shears and remove those spent blooms. Cut each faded stem all the way back to the basal foliage. By removing the seed heads before they fully mature, you convince the plant that it has failed to reproduce. In a beautiful and resilient panic, it begins producing fresh root growth and may reward you with a second, spectacular wave of flowers in autumn. When we continue holding on to past victories, we quietly tell our souls that our finest work is already finished. Cut away the faded glory of yesterday. The space may feel empty for a moment, but that emptiness is what allows the second bloom to appear. 18. Sow cover crops to heal and protect empty garden beds. By late August, some of your garden beds may stand empty after the onions, garlic, and early potatoes have been harvested. Leaving that soil bare and exposed to the weather is one of the most damaging choices you can make. Bare soil bakes beneath the sun. Its structure begins to break down. Its essential microbial life dies away, and winter rain can quickly wash out the nutrients you worked so hard to build. Instead, restore those empty beds by planting a cover crop, also known as green manure. Sow buckwheat for quick late summer coverage, or plant crimson clover, winter rye, and vetch to remain in place through the colder months. These crops are not planted to feed you. They are planted to feed the earth. Their deep roots hold the soil together, reduce erosion, and draw nutrients upward from deep beneath the surface. Legumes such as clover and vetch actively capture nitrogen from the air and move it into the root zone. When you cut these crops down in spring and work them back into the soil, they decompose into an enormous, completely free supply of rich organic matter and fertilizer that you produced yourself. Our minds, just like our soil, cannot remain empty for long. If we do not deliberately plant something beautiful, restorative, and life-giving in our quiet spaces, the universe will eventually fill them with weeds. Cover your empty beds with green growth and allow the soil to rest in peace. 19. Divide overgrown spring-blooming perennials. Look closely at your hostas, daylilies, and irises. Over many seasons, these beautiful clumps have become dense, crowded, and tightly congested. Their roots are competing against one another for space, while their flowers grow smaller and weaker with each passing spring. In cooler climates, August provides the perfect golden opportunity to divide them. Dig a wide circle around the base of the plant. Lift the entire heavy mass of roots from the ground and place it on a tarp. Using a sharp, clean spade or soil knife, cut directly through the center of the clump, dividing it into 2, 3, or 4 separate sections. Make sure every new division has a healthy root system and a strong crown of green foliage. Replant the divisions immediately at the same depth where the original plant had been growing. Water them deeply, then cover the surrounding ground with a fresh layer of mulch. In a single afternoon, one crowded plant can become 4 spacious and independent centers of life. You can spread them throughout your garden, share them with a neighbor, or use them to fill an entirely new bed. Sometimes, growth and survival require us to pass through division. Being cut through the center may feel violent, but it can be the only way to escape congestion, claim the space we need, and multiply our beauty throughout the world. 20. Prepare your season extension protection before cold weather arrives. It may be 95 degrees outside right now, making frost the last thing you are thinking about. But the gardener who survives winter is the gardener who prepares while the sun is still shining. Your fall crops may be growing beautifully, but eventually the first cold October night will quietly arrive. If you wait until a freeze warning is announced before searching for protection, you will find yourself desperately scrambling through the darkness and cold, using old buckets and plastic bags in an attempt to save your plants. Set aside 1 hour in August to organize your winter protection supplies. Find your floating row covers, purchase lightweight agricultural fabric, inspect your cold frames, and place a few old bed sheets somewhere easy to reach. If you are growing long-season, extremely hot peppers such as habaneros or Carolina reapers, make sure they are planted in large pots that can be moved easily. In northern climates, These peppers require more warmth than the late autumn air can provide. Prepare a space for them inside your greenhouse, or plan to bring them indoors at night whenever temperatures fall below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Wisdom means preparing your winter cloak while the afternoon remains warm. Organize your protection now, so that when the cold wind finally blows, you can sit beside the fire with a warm cup of tea, knowing that your garden is safely tucked beneath its blankets. Look carefully at these 20 tasks. They are not merely a collection of tiresome chores. They represent a deep and meaningful conversation between you and the earth. August is the moment when a choice must be made. It is the turning point that separates the passive observer from the true guardian of the land. Treat this month as the end, and your garden will begin to collapse. By October, your beds may be empty, bare, and cold. But treat August as the opening of a second act, and you can enter an autumn abundance that most people never realize is possible. A garden that continues feeding your family, your neighbors, and your soul long after the first snow begins to fall. Our time beneath the sun is brief, and the light is always quietly fading. Yet when we water at dawn, remove exhausted vines, protect exposed soil, and preserve the seed that has learned our name, we become part of something eternal. We align our lives with the natural and beautiful logic of the earth. Thank you for walking this path with me on Earthly Delights. Tell me in the comments, which of these tasks will you begin tomorrow morning? Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, keep your eyes on the stars, and always remember, the garden is listening.